These are the 12 most common materials that go into the green revolution. We need to double the amount of copper. We need 10 times as much nickel and lithium. We need 18 times as much graphite. And processing all of that stuff takes power. Everything that is a red wedge up there is processed primarily in China, and it will be going to zero. We're never going to do the green revolution, not at the scope and the speed that some people think. But we're going to try, and we're going to make some progress. And even if all we want is lithium batteries for our laptops and our phone, we're still going to need more than we have right now because we're going to lose a lot of what we have right now. And it has to be replaced. And it has to be processed somewhere with maritime access and cheap electricity. All right, let's say you want something a little less exotic. You want good old-fashioned steel. Most countries follow the same process. You start on the left here, you get iron ore, you throw it into a blast furnace with usually a bunch of coal. You basically melt the crap out of it and burn off all the impurities. That leaves you with an intermediate product called pig iron, which is useless, but it's a necessary step. That pig iron is then processed on in a more advanced facility, often part of the same complex, into rolled steel. The hot rolled steel is the stuff that's structurally strong, but not necessarily resistant to corrosion. And it's kind of ugly. So it's your car frame or the rebar in concrete. Or the high-end stuff, the cold rolled, that's the shiny stuff. If you can see steel in anything, in your watch, on a roof, that's cold rolled steel, much more expensive. Here in the United States, we don't do a lot of hot rolled steel in the traditional sense. We are the world's greatest steel recyclers. And about 95% of the steel that we use every day has already been used once, twice, 18 times. You can recycle it endlessly. But recycled steel can only be turned into hot rolled. You can't make it pretty, at least not yet. Cold rolled has to be made from pig iron. It has to be virgin steel. We don't do much with foundries. So what we do is we import someone else's pig iron, and we turn it into the highest quality steel in the world, mostly for export. 3/4 of global pig iron came from Iraq. Excuse me, wow, wrong war. 3/4 of global pig iron came from Russia and Ukraine. The Russian stuff is under sanction. We're not taking much of that into law anymore. That nuclear power plant in Ukraine we keep hearing about, that provided every electron of electricity that Ukraine's steel mills operated on. It's all gone. All that's left is Brazil, and there's not enough. So on top of everything else that you might be struggling with inflation, we also have a steel shortage. The things you need to make steel, iron ore, and then coal or electricity. Might not be as sexy as chromium, but wow, we need a bunch of it. All right, let's say you want to grow something instead of mine something. This is where the world's timber comes from. Anyone see a problem here? Russia, one way or another, is going away. Either it's going to win this war and it's going to be under crushing sanctions, or it's going to lose this war and it's going to fall apart. Either way, all of that goes away. Now, I'm not saying that you should go out there and cut down more trees, but this already is a harvesting zone. But because you're close to New Orleans, it is not a processing zone. I don't care if all you do is turn sawdust into pellets or make plywood or make furniture. The options are almost endless. And your proximity to population centers makes this perfect, because this is something Texas can't do because they don't have trees. Let's say you want to grow something you can eat. Here's corn. See a problem with Ukraine? Yeah. Now, there is currently a UN-managed export system that has safe haven pathways from the ports that allow the Ukrainians to export some grains, and they've been preferencing corn to this point because there's more dollar per bushel in it, and they've got to choose what they ship out. So wheat has basically gone to zero. Corn is actually up a little bit. But think about what the Russians are doing right now. The war is stalled, so they're using drones and missiles to target electrical infrastructure throughout the Ukrainian system, causing power outages, trying to cause as many deaths as possible. What do you think they're going to do once summer happens? There's no point in going after the power infrastructure then. They're going to go after the agricultural infrastructure. This is also going to zero. Now again, I'm not saying go out there and grow more corn, but anything you can do to add value, especially to a sector where you know the world is about to lose one of its major producers, whether you're making grits or pressing it into oil, same logic holds true for soy, same holds true for cotton and cottonseed. There's very little agricultural processing that happens within 500 miles of you. On one side of you, you've got Atlanta, on the other, you've got the Texas Triangle. Ravenous urban zones that need every scrap of value-added commodity they can possibly get their hands on. Grab the whip. What we're looking at here is the three major nutrients that go into all fertilizer. Nitrogen at the top, phosphate at the bottom, phosphate in the middle, potash at the bottom. These numbers here are the percentage that the United States imports. You'll notice for nitrogen and phosphate, we're pretty much self-sufficient. Our problem is potash. But 90% of the potash we get, you can't really read that, but this is Canada. So they're good for something. We only get 12% of one sliver from the conflict zone. Brazil gets over 80% of its fertilizer from the Russian space. Australia, it's about half. Oh no, it gets worse. Because the rest is roughly evenly split between China and the Middle East. Isn't it crazy? We've forgotten about the Middle East that soon. Spoiler alert, it hasn't gotten any better. And now that the United States is no longer in the middle of all of it, the Saudis and the Iranians are really looking forward to having a nice, dirty little war. And so everything that we've ever thought was a problem with the Middle Eastern energy is a problem with the Middle Eastern energy, but not for us because of the shale revolution. As of November of last year, we were back to a new all-time high. We are once again a net exporter of energy. I hate this graphic. This is the one that gives me nightmares. This is a calorie graphic. Every country in dark blue or dark green is a major producer and exporter of soy and grain-based calories. Everyone else is a net importer. And the countries in red and orange import at least half the calories they consume. The countries with X's are those that, in a world without a reliable fertilizer input system, are looking at least a 40% reduction in their ability to grow the crop in the first place. Deglobalization means a lot of different things for different people. For the United States, it's primarily an opportunity. We've been subsidizing the global system as our commitment to fight the Cold War, but that ended 30 years ago, and we've been backing away ever since. Joe Biden, since he was there when Europe was founded, remembers where Europe is. And we're seeing more security cooperation with the Europeans than we have since the 80s. And I personally think that's great. But there's no guns for butter deal in play here like there used to be. Every trade fight that Donald Trump picked, Biden has continued. In fact, he's taken every tweet that Trump ever sent out and turned it into policy and run it through a really good grammar checker and institutionalized it. We're not going back to the old system. And that means there's a lot of countries facing some critical challenges in just the next few years. And anyone who can take advantage of that by producing and processing foodstuffs for export is going to make an obscene amount of money. Manufacturing is sexy, I get it. But agriculture in North America, that is going to be the fastest growing economic sector in the world for at least the next 4 decades. And the decisions you make today will determine how big of a chunk of that is yours. Final slide. Inflation. This is the United States and Canada, similar economic structures, heavily interconnected. You'd expect the numbers to track, they do. We have 3 big phases in our inflation history since World War II. First of all, we had this first push when we globalized and industrialized. We built the interstate highway systems, we ran power to the countryside, we built our cities. Industrial, demand-driven inflation. Then we get to the 60s and the baby boomers come of age. They raise their kids, they buy their homes, they buy their cars. Consumer, demand-driven inflation. And then we've been living in this weird-ass period. The Chinese brought 1 billion workers to the table and pushed down the cost of manufacturing goods. The Soviet system collapsed, dumping an empire worth of raw materials into global markets. The two greatest disinflationary trends recorded in human history, and they lasted for 30 years. Well, folks, the disinflationary trends are turning inflationary. The Chinese labor is literally dying out, and the Russian stuff is going away. And the inflationary trends are back. The boomers may be retiring, but their kids, the millennials, are at the prime of their consuming years. And if we still want stuff, we need an industrial build-out that will double the size of our manufacturing capacity and our processing capacity.